Hello, everyone. Welcome to a sort of spontaneous little diversion for the morning and for Tuesday. So between James Lindsay and I believe Christina Hoff Summers, I have seen this name of thing mentioned several times on Twitter the last several days, something called disrupt texts. I had no idea what it was, but then this morning, Zach Osborne, who I believe is in the chat, hello, said, you should take a look at this. Like, okay, why not? And I click on the link, and the first thing that pops up is this lovely construction of words. Write for English Journal, new disrupt texts column. And I could stretch my imagination and have that first sentence, or title, I guess, make some kind of sense, but I found it kind of ironic that it reads very awkwardly for something that promises to teach me apparently how to write better or something. So what the heck? I have no idea what this publication or organization or whatever it does. I mean, I can make some assumptions from the title, disrupt texts. People are going to, I don't know, nitpick things that are written into oblivion. I can empathize. I nitpick things into oblivion, but all right. Well, I will leverage what little I remember of my English major education. I haven't read this before. I don't know what to expect. This may be interesting. This may be stupid, but thank you for those of you who are joining me for this, like I say, spontaneous little event. Zach Osborne, hello. The Magister, hello. Mike R, hello. Mike Savage, Blarg. Jake Tungseth, hello. Citron, hello. Good morning, everyone. All right, let's dive into this. The Disrupt Texts team is honored to announce a new column for English Journal. Oh, the official journal for secondary educators published by the National Council of Teachers of English, or the NCTE. So Write for English Journal isn't bad grammar. It's the title of a thing. Okay, well, I can forgive that then. Core principles to disrupt texts. Interrogating our biases to understand how they inform our teaching practices, centering the authentic voices and lived experience of people of color. Apply a critical literacy lens to our teaching practices that is anti-racist, anti-colonial, and anti-bias, and working in community with other educators, particularly Black, Indigenous, and educators of color. How have you engaged in any of the disrupt text principles? Excuse me. What impact has your work had on students? What challenges have you faced? And how did you address these challenges? Part of me wants to believe this is a PO, right? Part of me wants to believe that this is a setup. I will go forward regardless. Call for submissions. As teachers, we can push for restorative practices that repair the historic harm inflicted on students who endure school systems that perpetuate racial inequities by challenging the traditional white-centered canon to create a more inclusive, representative, and equitable language arts curriculum. Oh boy, oh boy. Educators must practice 4 principles for language arts equity. All right. I'm half inclined to pull out the TEDx bingo card here because holy cats, we already got a list. We got, oh man. Okay. Number 1, interrogating our biases to understand how they inform our teaching practices. Number 2, centering the authentic voices and lived experiences of people of color. I think I just read these off in the little caption above, but I'll continue. Number 3, applying a critical literacy lens to our teaching practices that is anti-racist, anti-colonial, and anti-bias. And number 4, working in community with other educators, particularly Black, Indigenous, and educators of color. This column is dedicated to supporting teachers who are committed to engaging themselves and their students in critical work that disrupts policies and curricula. The time for action and for dismantling and rebuilding our institutional practices towards justice is now. Have you engaged in any of the disrupt text principles? What impact has your work had on students? What challenges have you faced? And how did you address these challenges? We invite classroom practitioners. We invite classroom practitioners to share best practices and sample work that can highlight how we must disrupt and reimagine our text selections and instructional practices to better serve all students. Inquiries and submissions should be directed to disrupttext@gmail.com. Oh boy. Oh boy. All right, so this isn't an article. This is just a send us your stuff. Okay. Oh, wait. Hold on. Let's see. Submission length. Yeah. News documenting. Yeah, ensure that the manuscript conforms to the NCTE statement on gender and language. Oh, okay. What is that? I'll have to share this one over here. I'm dying to know. Statement on Gender and Language, date October 25th, 2018, category Curriculum, Diversity, Grammar, Instruction, Language, Writing. As both a product and an engine of human culture, language is inherently dynamic and ever-evolving. Regarding the intersection of language, gender, and equity, the English language has been in a period of active shift for several decades. That dynamism is reflected in the evolution of NCTE's position statements on gender and language through the last 40 years. In 1978, NCTE published the first predecessor of this statement with the help of the Committee on the Status of Women in the Workplace. Originally titled Guidelines for Non-Sexist Use of Language in NCTE Publications, the document was revised first in 1985 and again in 2002 when the Women in Literacy and Life Assembly, or WILA, renamed it Guidelines for Gender Fair Use of Language. At that time, the statement explored the ways in which language reflects and shapes understandings of gender, and it offered examples of ways in which language might promote the fair treatment of women and girls in early childhood, elementary, secondary, and post-secondary educational settings. The current document, Statement on Gender and Language, 2018, reflects NCTE's ongoing commitment to gender equity in education and also builds on contemporary understandings of gender that include identities and expressions beyond a woman-man binary. Rather than reinscribe the gender binary or cis-normativity, the assumption that each person's gender identity corresponds to the sex they were assigned at birth, this document aims to support people of all genders. This statement will discuss how gender differs from sex and sexuality, will explain what is meant by the term gender binary, will recommend ways educators might use language to reflect the reality of gender diversity and support gender diverse students, and will highlight resources English language arts educators at any level may use to support more nuanced and inclusive understandings and discussions of gender in classrooms, schools, and broader communities. Assigned at birth is pretty much where you had me and lost me. All right, let's go back to the main site here. What do we want to do? Oh boy, we have just a menu to choose from. Disrupt text in your classroom with these 8 texts. Disrupt texts in Michigan. Disrupt texts in St. Louis, Chicago, Virginia. Colorado, disrupting genre. Disrupting the hero's journey. Ooh, let's take a look at that one. Disrupting the hero's journey. Click here to view the archived Twitter moment. Summary. The archived Twitter moment. That page doesn't exist. Okay, well, guess no hero's journey. Okay, disrupting the Crucible, disrupting Shakespeare, disrupting the Great Gatsby. Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of offensive stuff in the Great Gatsby. God, the Crucible. What do I want to do? God, I'm trying to think of what's the last book I read that I could relate or have a memory of distinctly. I think it might have been The Crucible, because that was one of the books I had to read in my English literature class in college, but that was many, many moons ago now. Oh, well, let's just Let's just go for that. Disrupting the Crucible by Julia E. Torres. We talked everything. We talked everything related to Arthur Miller's The Crucible in June 2018. Check out the archived Twitter moment here to gather some ideas on how to teach this text through an anti-bias, anti-racist lens. Did The Crucible involve racism? Can't remember. From Black Lives Matter to the Me Too movement to reconciliation for multi-generational crimes against tribal nations, the Disrupt Text chat about Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, was a moment in time where powerful thinking and conversation transpired. How do we move beyond the traditional considerations of McCarthyism, feminism, and the effect of Puritanism on society? Oh, I don't know. Maybe not holding people to account for suspected wrongthink. How do we move beyond McCarthyism? Let's talk about anti-racism for a second, shall we? This is me going off script for a second. For those of you that don't know, the current philosophy, if not faith system, called anti-racism posits this, and I'm taking this directly from our saint Ibram X. Kendi, the writer of the book How to Be Anti-Racist, who explained it thus wise. There is no such thing as not being racist. There are either two conditions. You're either racist or you are anti-racist, because racism, like original sin, is pervasive, perpetual, and constant in all people. So either you are racist, as in being in denial of the racism you possess, or you are anti-racist, which is a eternal confessional of the racism you possess. Now then, McCarthyism, suspecting someone to be guilty, right? Accusations of guilt without necessary evidence, guilt presumed before innocence. Anti-racism, everybody's guilty, no matter what. It just depends on whether or not you're willing to confess your guilt. Confess which? Confess your crimes. Otherwise, you are suspected otherwise to be guilty. Yes, so when we want to move beyond traditional considerations of McCarthyism, I suppose maybe they're trying to move towards neo-McCarthyism. I don't know. How do we look at central themes such as religious persecution, scapegoating, witch hunts, quote unquote, and patriarchy as existing forces that shape society in order to read this work with a forward-facing, critical eye? A traditional reading of The Crucible is one that looks at the work as a powerful piece of social commentary that came out of the McCarthy era and captured a moment in American history when suspicion and mass hysteria led to the persecution of thousands of American citizens. Yes, suspicion, mass hysteria, persecution of American citizens for potential thought crime. Imagine that, guys. The work is often a standard part of high school language arts curriculum and is often taught concurrently with social studies courses examining the era. Educator and literary scholar Dulce Marie Fletcher commented during the chat that, quote, "We are not what we read, we are how we read." Okay, and so learning how to read this text through the lens of any critical theory will require some unconventional thinking and exploration of ideas that may historically not have been given priority. Maybe because they were dumb. We make room in educational spaces to explore ideas that are comfortable and familiar to us and those areas in which we can pass on knowledge we already have. But we know that art is a reflection of the world we live in, and in order for it to have the greatest impact on the present and future, we must support students in the development of a critical consciousness that has the potential to expand their world. Nothing about the majority of that paragraph meant anything. That was all absolute fluff nonsense. What are some ways to do this? Educators in the chat discussed using The Crucible as a way to open up conversations about prison and bail reform. Okay, ways to interrogate systems of power and privilege that marginalize people of color, and many others from minoritized populations. Okay, several educators also discuss specific ways to disrupt practices of analyzing literature that disproportionately center and privilege white Christian males and their perspectives, as is the case with this play. Okay, I'll admit, it's been a long time since I looked at the Crucible. But the point of the play has nothing to do with race. It has to do with suspicion and fear and mass hysteria and persecution and, superstition and on and on and on. These things that are applicable to all people and all cultures. It's a human condition, not a racial condition. But even if you're going to look at the text literally, and that's perfectly fine, the people doing the bad things were all white. The villains and the heroes, the persecutors and the victims were all white. So, okay. AP language arts educator and Disrupt Text co-founder and scholar Tricia Abarvia questioned, quote, how does the play perpetuate the good man who makes a mistake narrative while marginalizing and vilifying others, unquote. Okay, questions such as this one give us a way to both analyze the impact this work has had on the development of mass consciousness for those who include it as part of their literary lineage and consider ways to unpack subconscious thought patterns that lead to the perpetuation of a racist, sexist, patriarchal status quo. Wow, the Crucible did all that? Really? The Crucible's teaching racism. It's teaching sexism. It's teaching the benefits of patriarchy. Wow, the Crucible did all that? A critique of McCarthyism. A critique of unfair treatment of people. Guilt before innocence, on and on. Wow, the Crucible did all that. That's what it's teaching? Okay. Reading the Crucible with a critical eye towards disruption offers an avenue for transforming oppressive actions and thoughts rooted in the patriarchal hegemony that all too often leads to laws, policies, and other practices that oppress and dehumanize in every society. Miller's decision, for example, to caricaturize the only black female, Tituba, the slave, does have consequences both in the play and in the real world, especially if that caricaturization goes unchallenged or unmentioned. Furthermore, though many language arts classes are accustomed to analyzing the text through a feminist lens, are they? The feminist lens, historically and traditionally, centers white female concerns. A decolonization lens offers an analysis of the work through the eyes of those of us who are descendants of people harmed by the legacy of colonization, used religious and other cultural beliefs to justify slavery, genocide, and other forms of multi-generational emotional and physical violence. The Crucible is a commentary on McCarthyism. It is a commentary on holding someone accountable by accusation alone. Right? Listen to the Edward R. Murrow critique of McCarthyism and McCarthy. You know, I can't quote it to save my life, but it's something to the effect of, we shall not walk in fear of one another, so on and so forth. It's a human condition: suspicion, hysteria, fear, religious persecution, suspicion. I already said suspicion. Superstition. Using the mob to ply your own agenda, which, of course, we haven't seen just recently. For those of you keeping tabs, let's say, it is December 29th, 2020, within the last 48 hours, 72 hours or so, a particular story that the New York Times has basically promoted as a good thing involved a what was it, a high school student or just up to college student who found a video of a girl from 4 years ago where she uses the N-word while making a quick video to her friend as a joke, who then held on to this video until he found out that this other girl, who he did not know personally, had just applied to or was about to get into a college of her choice. And then he released this video and framed it as a crime of the century. This girl then had her entire life disrupted. She was let go from the college she was at. She's been vilified by the mob online and so on and so forth. And the young crusader who did the virtuous thing by destroying this girl's life intentionally, he's lauded and extolled and lionized by the New York Times as some kind of, I don't know, progressive activist or something. Right? She's guilty for nothing but saying a word at some point 4 years ago. That's it. Someone who's been completely vilified for one tiny mistake that has nothing to do with anything. If you want to even call it a mistake, right? And we want to talk about McCarthyism. But that was done in the name of anti-racism. That was done in the name of equality and racial justice, social justice. But anyway, we know that we are living in a world that still uses mass hysteria, paranoia, and xenophobia to maintain control over a populace accustomed to being misinformed and manipulated through the media. We know that fake news is actually real in its ability to sway public opinion and lead to serious consequences. And so is the power of trending hashtags of a trending hashtag to create buzz around an event or person, often blending fact with fiction, always with an eye on manipulating public opinion to one's advantage. That's an amazing, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Tell me how that's not being employed by what I can only assume is your side of the aisle. One of the most important questions we pose is why, in education, we tend to teach young people to read literature in a way that centers ideas and beliefs belonging to one group as common body of knowledge that belongs to us all. As a common body of knowledge that belongs to us all. Because literature is a common body of knowledge that belongs to us all. Go to a public library. What do you think a public library is for? What, at this point, especially on the internet, you can find the text of just about any classic book or piece of literature that isn't copyrighted to hell and read it. Or again, public library. However, as the Crucible shows, a truth is only a truth if people accept it as such. The Crucible doesn't show that. The Crucible is a commentary on that way of thinking. It is a critique. It is satire after a fashion. It's not a guidebook. It's not a lesson book for how to behave. It's a warning. Perhaps some of the most interesting conclusions from the chat are the many ways in which educators are disrupting the reading of this text with a view toward how modern McCarthyism, mass hysteria, sexism, patriarchy, and scapegoating still operate today. Perhaps we as a community of educators can learn to dig even deeper and analyze the underlying factors that keep us from elevating our consciousness to a higher form of humanity, one that values and defends true justice rather than the appearance of it. Perhaps transforming the way we think will also transform the way we act, and the very process of transformation will serve as a type of reparation, a way to reconcile our troubled past with our ruthless and all too often inhumane present. Wow, there is just an absolute minefield of self-revelation in there. But so, and again, I haven't looked at this site before. This entire thing is based around Twitter thread chats. Each one of these articles or analyses are just people tweeting at each other in a thread for God knows how long. Okay, well, that, for the sake of brevity, is my examination of disrupt texts for whatever it's worth. Its mission statement and an example of its work, I suppose. This wasn't meant to be anything longer than just a few minutes because I didn't know what I was getting into, but I will go to the chat if you guys have any comments or anything to add for the next 5 minutes or so. Go for it. After that, I will wrap up and see you guys tonight. Let's see. Zach Osborne. No, I saw CH Summers tweet about it and dug into the hashtag last night a little bit and some this morning before I discovered this website. Okay. Yeah, I'd seen it mentioned on a couple of people's tweets, but I hadn't even looked at it. Brad Young, Morning Scribe, what have we here? Well, we have a very skewed way of taking literature and saying it's all bad, I guess, by intentionally missing the point or not even considering for a moment that what they're, especially in the instance of the Crucible, that what they're promoting is kind of similar, wrong thinking, holding somebody to account for something they didn't do for the placation of the mob and so on. Yeah. Let's see. Who else? Thank you, Pecoraro, the Driving Ape Man, for the communistic thumbs up. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Killer Turnus, Scribe Light, Word Salad, and Echo Chamber. Truth. Jake Tungseth, when I was disruptive in class, I got detention. Yeah, I know, right? Zach Osborne says, hit up the To Kill a Mockingbird article for lulz. I don't know if I could do. Kill a Mockingbird has a special place in my heart. I love that movie. It's one of my mom's favorite movies. Still a great movie, great book. Let's see. Anybody else? Ex-Bubba Hotep, snitches get stitches, and he was the worst kind of snitch. Oh, the kid in the... it was just bizarre. If you read that article, just as an aside, there's a story in there how about the kid, I guess his father's white and his mother is black. And they would go to family gatherings, and the N-word would be thrown around relatively often. But then when his dad, the white police officer, at some point used the N-word in a joking way, he, the kid, took his dad aside to tell him how that was wrong. And he needed not to do that. Like, okay. So, of course, my question was, and I meant to bring this up last night on Lords of the Night, but I was absent because I was not feeling well. Since his dad said it, doesn't his dad's career need to be lampooned? Does it need, or I should say harpooned, lampooned? Shouldn't his dad's career as a police officer, his reputation be utterly destroyed because, I mean, he was a white person that used the word? Should he be treated any different than this complete stranger to him that he sent a video out about and tried to get her life destroyed? Maybe we'll talk about it tonight on the show if they didn't do it last night. Thank you, Quinn the Cultist, for the Dogcat Fox. #1, Dogcat Fox. Yay, Dogcat Fox. Let's see. And Killer Turnus, Scribe Light, is it just me or the crazies reinventing the word disrupt? After a fashion, it's like by saying we have to disrupt this thing, that means you're going to come in and be contrarian in some fashion, even if your attempt at being contrarian is just to reverse the words of a thing and sound like you're being innovative or insightful. I mean, there can be some merit to that, right? Just as a mental exercise. Take something that everybody presumes to be true for a second, some truism, and then just say, what if it's like this? I mean, it's not an unuseful thing to do sometimes. It at least makes you think about things. Or at the very least, you can take that perspective or that offering of an idea and show by the current thinking on things how it doesn't work. That can reinforce our understanding of the world. It is useful to challenge preconceptions sometimes. Not going to deny that. But doing it just to do it and then offering it as actual insight without saying, what if? And rather say, this is. That's a bit presumptuous and always makes me a little bit suspicious. But that's a conversation probably for another time. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this brief little jaunt into disrupt texts. I don't know that I'll ever be coming back to it again, but you never know. If you'd like to hear more from me or the Ranting Monkey or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find all three of us tonight on my channel, this channel, at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we will talk about the news of the day, news stories you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. Everyone, hope you're all having a good Tuesday. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.